Still Believe is the latest film from the Erwin brothers, the same people who brought us I Can Only Imagine, and this time it centers around the Christian contemporary singer Jeremy Camp, his life, the people around him, and what really matters most of all. It stars Britt Robertson, KJ Apa, and the talented Gary Sinise. It's a charming film. Again, it's in the Christian genre, and you should probably check this film out. I really enjoyed it. My wife really enjoyed it, and we're going to talk about this in my next conservative take. Hi, my name is Kyle, and if you're unfamiliar with the way I do my movie reviews, please click the link above, and that will explain everything. As always, we will have a spoiler section, which you may want to avoid if you want to not know what's going on with this film. Now, with that, this film is called, again, I Still Believe. It's from the Erwin brothers, and it stars Britt Robertson and KJ Apa and Gary Sinise. The film is centered around the life of Jeremy Camp, the Christian contemporary artist, how he got started, the people around him, and it's a relationship between he and a girl, and I don't want to get too much into it here, but if you know the story of Jeremy Camp, this will come as no surprise. Those of you who do not know, just know this is essentially a love story. It's in some ways a coming of age story because it's about him in college, in a small Christian college on the West Coast, and his coming up, trying to find his way in the world. He's a songwriter, and he wants to make it big, so he tries to get in with a group that's local to that area, and he meets the lead singer in that group. They become friends, and I will say that a love triangle does come forward with that, and that shouldn't spoil too much of anything, but that's kind of charming in and of itself. There's some awkward moments there that people of the young age encounter on their own. It's a wholesome film. Again, it's from the Christian genre, so you can expect to see the sort of evangelical push, but unlike a lot of films that are coming up now in the evangelical era, they're not shoving the message, the gospel message, down your throat to a way it kind of takes you out of the movie. No, it lets it breathe. It deals with people of who they are and where they are, and it shows their frailties, their flaws, their pimples, their warts, everything. And so it lets you be more sympathetic and empathetic with these characters, because oftentimes we see them and they're nothing more than cardboard cutouts. And we're like, I don't really feel that. But these characters, you really start to pull for them and say, hey, you know what? I kind of feel what they're going through, and they're not really giving me this message that I really would expect to see, but it's there under the surface, and it's subtle, but it's still, in my opinion, very effective. So it will broaden itself to a wider audience, not just a strictly Christian conservative, evangelical type crowd. Of course, it is totally appropriate and fun for that crowd, but again, it's not going to put off people who are just outside of that genre, people who just want to see a good movie. This is one for them as well. Now, for the category of story, I'm going to give this film a 6, mainly because it is pretty much a linear story and with a linear arc, which is, I have to say, not too impressive, but it is what it is. I mean, it's a true story, it's his story, and so I don't want to fault it too much because I'm glad that they don't put too much into it and try to make it be more than it needs to be. So the 6 is fine. It just isn't a strength of the story in terms of what it is. But the underlying message of it is phenomenal, and we'll get to some of that a little bit later. Now, for emotional impact, I'm going to give this film a 9. I went to see this with my wife, and she cried all the way through the film. I mean, she was really emotionally tied to this. This is probably the first film that I'm giving an emotional impact from someone's perspective other than myself. Now, I felt some tugs here and there, but it came mainly from the Gary Sinise character who plays the father of Jeremy Camp. I thought he was wonderful, and some of the themes throughout the film were very powerful to me. But, I mean, it was an emotional thing for many people in the theater. In fact, there wasn't a dry eye in the entire theater. So for that, I'm going to just trust them and my wife and say, hey, this is a 9. if I had felt that way, I might have given it a 10. But yeah, it's powerful. It's one of the strengths of this film. It's very, 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 very strong in that category. I will put it that way. So for the category of intangibles, I'm going to give this film a 7. Let's start with the acting. The acting I thought was on point. I thought Britt Robertson did a fantastic job. I think KJ Apa did a pretty good job as well as Jeremy Camp. And I think that Shania Twain, she's also in this film. I didn't mention that. And of course, Gary Sinise, we all know about him. But overall, the acting, the subtleties, and the performances, I was noticing that they did a really good job, and I really liked it. But what the really is the strength of this film, as you can imagine, is the music. And I wish they just had a little bit more of it. I wish they did more of the full song. So they would do a song and then kind of do a third of it. And I'm like, the arrangements, and being a musical person myself, I played in the band for a couple years. And so I was noticing a lot of the undertones with the guitar riffs they were doing in there at the highest pitch in there, just to keep it right there. And it was a really powerful renditions all across the board. And I thought that Jeremy Camp really showed his prowess in lyrically and vocally, and I just thought it was very tasteful, and that really helped catapult the movie to a place where most films just can't get there. Intangibles are things that are outside of the screenplay, right? They're outside of all the things that you typically do in a film. It's the things that just come and are there based on the acting performances and the things that are just intangible. And this film has that. And so I think that makes this movie much more than it is, and a very, very enjoyable film, especially when there's any musical number going on. So for the category of watchability, I'm going to give this film a 7. Gary Sinise anchors the film, gives it weight and credibility. The acting between Britt and KJ are wonderful. You're pulling for them. Their chemistry is just fantastic. They're humorous. They banter. It's great. And you're reminded when you were young and you first fell in love, how that felt. It reminds you through that. And plus, it makes you vested. So it takes you along their journey. And so as you're going through it, it makes it a very, very easy watch all the way through to the end. So for my overall score in this film, my overall feeling of this, I'm going to give this a 7. I'm going to cover a lot more of this in my conservative take. So check that out if you want to know more, but also be mindful of spoilers. Okay, so now we're on to my conservative take for this film. And no surprise here, it's going to be a go, because it is a wholesome film. Problem is, it's also a tragedy. Now listen, this is a spoiler section, so be careful here, because I'm going to say some things that may spoil it for some of you. Some of you who know the story of Jeremy Camp already know what I'm going to say about here. If you don't know the story of Jeremy Camp and what happens with his life, then I suggest, and you don't want to know, I suggest you kind of cut out and go to the end of this section to the final take and on to the rest of it. Essentially, this is a tragedy. He meets his first wife, Melissa, and it's the courting process of that. And it deals with faith, and she ends up being sick. She has cancer, and she has to deal with that situation. He decides to marry her regardless of that situation. And it's about hope and faith and him trying to be there for her and be the man that he needs her to be, the man that he wants to be for her, and against his father's wishes, against his mother's wishes, because they're like, hey, this is a big responsibility. You're in college, and even the dean of the school or the department doesn't want him to do it. So it's basically his faith in God and his love for this woman makes him want to continue on. And so the film is very, very powerful in that regard. Like I said before in my other section here, watching them court and go all the way through that process and then see this happening, it's the long form version of the movie Up. The first 15 minutes of that, if you've seen that, where the couple grow up and so forth. And it does pull a lot on those heartstrings. And so for that regard, I would say you probably want to keep small children away from this film unless you're prepared to talk to them about this. It deals with faith and God, and why does bad things happen to good people, and why does prayer seem to not work the way we want it to work, and destiny and all of that. And so I'll leave it at that. There's a message at the end about grief counseling. They leave a number for there. I'll leave a link to that as well for those who are suffering with grief and want grief counseling, because this has a lot to do with that as well. It's a very deep film, and again, it came from the same people who made I Can Only Imagine. And although I think that film was better, I think this is just as powerful, if not more powerful than that film. So, with that, I would say Christian films are really, really evolving in a way that's making it way more palatable for a wide open audience to find out more about the faith and people and the music, and without hitting you over the head with the Bible, which I'm not opposed to that all the time anyway, but some people don't like that. But this film, I think, does that, and it's a film definitely worth checking out. So for my final take, I'm going to give I Still Believe a 14.25, which translates to 3 stars out of 4 and a go for my conservative take. I would say definitely go check this film out. Take your whole family. Just maybe leave the smaller kids at home unless you want to explain some of these heavier themes to them. It's not bad, won't hurt them, but just be mindful of that. The music is superb, fantastic. The arrangements, just stellar. The acting is on par, and I think the courtship is what makes this film so charming. So the real question is this: what do you think? Are you planning on seeing I Still Believe? Or if by the time you've seen this video, have you seen it? Let me know in the comments below. And if you like the content on this channel where I take culture, TV, and movies and filter it right, please click the like and subscribe button and that bell icon so that you do not miss any future content. And please share with your friends. And as always, please check out some other content that I have right here.